done for the benefit of your people and by extension ourselves. Almighty God, as we deliberate, let us not do so with any rancor or with any malice. Let us do so to honor your name. These mercies we ask in a holy and precious name, through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Thank you. Apologies? Any apologies? No apologies. Yes. This is an apology from the Auditor General?
Yeah.
Member Hannah had asked me to.
Oh, and Member Hannah had asked us to convey her apology. Right. Okay. So it's for me to welcome everyone here. Welcome members. Welcome our technical support from the Auditor General's office, from the Ministry of Finance, and of course the team from RADA and the ministry.
Yes.
And the PSCJ, yes. We are today going to continue where we left off at our last meeting on the 14th of January. We've had to reschedule this meeting because of the supplementary budget and the pressures around getting that done, which led to a request for us to change the date, which was originally scheduled for this meeting. We have before us minutes of the last meeting, and I must confess I didn't see that they were attached to the email that was sent on Monday, so I haven't actually read them, and so I would just propose to defer them, and when we get the minutes for the next meeting, we'll just deal with both. Yeah. All right. So at that point, I think we can just go straight back into the substantive issue. And we were going through the prompt, and I think we had reached issue 5 in the prompt. And so I will commence there. Issue 5 reads as follows: RADA's omission of critical specifications from road rehabilitation contracts, coupled with the absence of routine and regular maintenance, heightened the risk of substandard work. We expected that RADA would ensure that the design for farm roads included proper drainage to allow for adequate water runoff and extend the life of the road. RADA frequently rescoped works to omit infrastructure that were deemed critical, such as drains and culverts, and changed the location of contracted works without any evidence of remeasurement. We reviewed 46 contracts relating to 117 roads and found 53 instances where deliverables of the contract works were rescoped by works engineers and the CEO to exclude the required drainage, culverts, and pavements. Management's comment on that is, we accept the observation as a breach of proper protocol and compromise of the longevity of the roads. However, the rescoping was not undertaken arbitrarily, but underwent reassessment of the terrain and consultation with relevant stakeholders, to include the farmers who had experience of the areas rescoped. This often results in greater benefit of an extension of the road work initially planned within budget. While additional kilometer of road repairs was obtained due to the rescope, in future we will seek to follow the recommended guidelines of the government. Right. So the issues here appear to be leaving out important infrastructure to support the lifespan of the road, such as drains and culverts, and rescoping the actual work, sometimes changing the location of contracted works without evidence of remeasurement. Members, do you have any comments on that?
Chairman, thank you. It's interesting that the response of the RADA included stakeholders such as farmers. Part of the challenge I have with that, however, Chairman, is that whilst you always will need local input into the design in terms of where water flows and so on to get institutional knowledge from those who are there. We find very often, and this is something that I don't want us to say, we get the recommendations from the farmers and hence utilize it as an excuse, because very often in rural parishes, and increasingly more so, Chairman, we find that farmers are preventing the local authorities, whether it's parish council and or the National Works Agency, for putting drains into their fields. So we have that challenge, and in fact in some instances you see the drains are there and after a while they block it up because they don't want that volume of water coming through their fields and creating erosion there. So when you rely on them for this, you also have to take into consideration their desire not to have their fields further eroded by water, because legally you can empty water into the field based on the Works Agency Act and whatever governs it. But I am somewhat constrained by the fact that they will also tell you that no, it's better you put it down the sub simply because they don't want the water to flow through their field. So it is something that your engineers need to take on board when that is considered, or when that is said to you, because that can lead to, as the AG's department has found out, a deterioration of the road simply because of drainage issues that we have. And certainly in my neck of the woods we have a lot of drainage problems which have to be addressed with water getting off the road, because our soil is one such that does not lend for good roads. So if you don't get the water off it, the lifespan of the road is cut by about a third.
I just want to understand though, how is it that we get to the point of signing contracts to do road work without having consulted locally on the ground around the design, and then we're told that after the contract is signed and so on, the contracts are varied because of input from local people saying, you know, don't put a culvert or a drain or use that money and extend the road a little further and so on. That just seems a very poor way of proceeding, because it lends itself to arbitrary decisions being taken rather than a proper process leading to a contract which is executed in accordance with its terms. It's one thing if something comes up which was unforeseeable and you have to do a variation, but that doesn't seem to be the case here. This is a pattern in which this is a way in which they operate. They start the thing and then change it midstream without according to the Auditor General's report, without remeasurements sometimes, and leaving off critical infrastructure at other times. A note that you're saying here, Radha, that in the future you will seek to follow the recommended GOJ procurement guidelines. But I think you touched on this last time, but I'd like you to go over it again as to why it is there was this prevailing pattern of behavior in relation to these roads, and what you're going to do to stop doing that going forward.
May I just, I don't know if this is just a clarification on issue 5. We reviewed 46 contracts relating to 117 roads. Do I take it that one contract would be covering 2 or 2.5 roads?
No, this says that there were 46 contracts relating to 117 roads. So clearly some of those contracts would have covered more than one road. I mean,
Yes, certainly.
mathematically that would.
Yeah.
Please, Mr. Thompson.
Yes, good morning, members, chairman. Yes, sometimes we have one contract that consists of more than one road. So in this case, we one contractor, all right. So we have seen this, but I want to point out something that you have raised earlier in relation to the scoping or de-scoping. I think going forward we need to do greater, interactions with the community out there to do a more detailed scoping. We have done that, but based on what you're saying, that when recommendations are made by the farming community to change, like drains and so forth, we need to. Well, it's something that we will, engage with more going forward. But I want to point out something though.
Mr. Chairman, may I get something? It's not normal practice for any agency to consult the community when you put in scope together. If you're going to a community and you're putting together a scope of work, if you're going to consult every interest group and everyone in the community, you'll never get a proper thing done. This is never normal practice, neither by NWA, Parish Council, Factory Corporation, or any agency. Your technical team should determine what is best and what is in the interest of the people in the community, but not to consult them in putting together your scope of work. When your technical team go into a field, they ought to see what ought to be done. I've never heard before, and I'm a practitioner in this field from 1972, where public agency consult community. You consult them when you brief them on the projects that's going to start. You are going to do a project and you brief them, but not in putting together. This scope of work, that is technical staff and engineers. The other issue raised about one contractor might have multiple contracts. Are these direct contracts, or are they tendered? Most of them are, I believe, go to tender.
Yes.
The procurement guideline provides for a minimum of 3 up to 20, up to 10, and a minimum of 5 up to 20. So if one contractor can sharpen his pencil more than the other, he's going to get the job. And there are some who work at very low rates within the stuff. So your agency have no control over it once you follow the guidelines, the 3 contractor, the 5 contractor. And I'm sure on these 70 or whatever your project we're talking about, they were not the same 3 bidders or the same 5 bidders. So you can't say that your agency, no one can say your agency has collusion in the whole stuff.
That issue hasn't come up this morning.
You mentioned it a while ago. It was mentioned here a while ago.
No.
It was mentioned here, that's why I mentioned it. Because so we should be going back.
Not on the mic.
Yeah, man, it was. It was, and that's why I said we should be going back.
No.
Just to follow up on the member, let me ask, how many engineers you have in your employed to the 5? And it's just an observation, because you have a budget per road that you actually
Wait, before, hold that point for me.
Yeah.
Because I've already started something and he hasn't responded yet. And then Mr. Warmington interjected. And I just want some clarity on this. My understanding is that you had said last time we met that the local knowledge on the ground can impact some of the decisions around scoping or rescoping. And that has, in fact, sometimes led to rescoping. Member Warmington has said essentially that's not what should happen. Your technical people should decide scoping issues without the community having an input on that. I want your feedback on that, please, because you have said to us that one of the reasons why you have this frequent rescoping has been in response to information or concerns raised on the ground when the contract is being done. Please explain the situation.
All right. In some instances, Chairman, which I have mentioned at the last meeting, is that because these roads were in deplorable conditions for decades and were not attended to. Sometimes when we go in and we had initially had drainage, when we go inside there, we find like drains that were hidden, that were not observed. So rather than putting in new drains, we clean those and then we extend the road, which created some value. What the guys have not done is the proper documentation of these, and we will enforce that going forward.
Member Phillips, you'd asked about the engineers.
Yeah, no, and it ties back into, or you are?
Sorry, you were before him?
I will.
Yeah, we will yield to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what I wanted to find out, just read the remeasurement, evidence of remeasurement as they have stated. How do you rescope a work? Just looking at the measurement that you would have taken, and if it is that you need culvert or drainage, is the money then put towards the roadway? If it is that they already have proper drainage there, and how is that done?
Yes. Yeah, we normally do it through variation, which normally goes to the Procurement Committee. That is what we are doing right now.
And just as a follow-up, are all farm roads scoped with drainage? Because I know, especially with the terrain, looking at the terrain in some constituencies, are all farm roads with the money that you have set aside for farm roads, are all of them scoped for drainage?
We are necessary. If drain is not required, then we don't scope.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Through you today, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, for the money that I see granted at times for the different farm roads, first of all, and I said it before, you use the program Chip and Spray for farm roads. I've never seen Barber Green on a farm road yet. I've never seen Barber Green. I've seen Chip and Spray on Barber Green on farm roads. But that's exactly what I'm saying. When you go down to Paul Island or Fuller's Field in Westmoreland, the entire area there, that community or those communities are farming communities, cane belt. I never drive on it and see Barber Green. I see Chip and Spray and a still farm road. So I'm just using it as an example. When I go up to Flower Hill in my constituency, it is Chip and Spray. So and what's the point? The point is, Mr. Chairman, I came in just at the point where Member Campbell was speaking about the contracts being awarded. And I'm saying, when a contractor wins a contract from, say, he's operating out of Kingston, wins a contract.
You know, win contract.
What you do?
All right, go on.
Mr.
When he's awarded a contract, for the better term, right? It is for $7 million. You expect him to come to Montego Bay, Mr. Chairman, with all the equipment for $7 million.
But what did he tend on the difficult manager?
No.
He was invited.
And I'm asking the question. So
So how is he going to execute the contract that he's bid for if he doesn't have the equipment to do it?
I'm asking a question.
Your question is whether they actually execute the contract properly, having been awarded it by providing the equipment required?
That is my question. That is my question, sir. But
Well, then answer it for Mr. Thompson.
One of the options available for contracting is limited tender, Chairman. So if limited tender means that you would engage contractors closer to the area or within the area.
No. Let me correct you there. Let me correct you with that one. Let me correct you.
Wait, Mr. Wilmington.
No,
hold on. I know you're going to correct him. And you've already explained the correct thing already.
No, I haven't.
Well, I want to ask you, let him finish and then you correct what the limited tender thing means. But just make him make the point that he's making, please.
Right. No, that's one of the options available. Also, we have what you call direct contracting, which we don't use, our emergency, our open tender. No, the member is writing saying whether or not, no, listen, if you have a contract for $7 million and you open tender for that, generally, no, the mobilization cost to get the equipment, if a contractor in Morant Bay wins that bid, by the time he moves his equipment to Montego Bay where that road might be, 50% of that money would have eaten up. So I'm saying to you that is one of the options available is limited tender for those small sums, and sometimes we are accused of using too much of that, but I mean, it is what it is.
So I want to explain
Tell me something, just a minute, tell me.
sorry.
You are saying if the guys from St. Thomas is the Montego Bay offers the mobilization, eat up all of that. Are you saying now if I'm a contractor in St. Catherine and I attend on a project in St. James and I'm the lowest bidder, you're going to make and get it? No. Right, so you can't say what you're saying. There's no zoning and a limitation here. There's nothing like that. You cannot prevent a contractor who wishes to tender on a project, regardless where it's located. It is his problem. If he tenders a $7 million project, and he's in St. Thomas, no, but he has to complete the project as scoped. He has to complete the project as scoped.
Won't be paid.
Right, he cannot be paid. So it's not their concern if the guy is from St. Thomas and bid in St. James. It's his problem if he can't make money. But he has to do what is scoped, not a penny less. That's what I know contracting is.
So, Mr. Clark,
the other issue is, what they should look at is these little meager $6 million and $7 million and stuff. This is the crook of the matter, and this is what destroys the whole stuff. You look at a project, you put a reasonable amount, a meaningful amount that can do that road. But you're not going to put a $6 million and $7 million when it needs 25 or 30 million to do it. Do 3 roads in Jamaica and complete it for what it works. But not a 6 million, a 3 million, a 4 million a road. You're wasting your time. Your paperwork almost costs more than that. So waste your time on your technical officer and paperwork when you do 6 million, 5 million contract. Do what is reasonable. If it's 2, you can do for the year, do 2. If it's 6, do. But don't try to please every community by doing a 6 or 5 million. You do them a disservice. They're done a disservice. So think carefully what you're doing and allocate the funds that is adequate to do a project on piecemeal.
Member Phillips, you had not got a chance to finish the point you were making.
Yeah. No. So I asked a question about how many engineers you have, and you said 5. Are the engineers the ones who creates the design for the roads that are being done and do the original scope before it goes out to tender, even though, as a member said, and I asked the question because you have a fixed sum that you attribute to each of these roads, which is, I think, is about $6 million. In most instances, $7 million. And only a few as to get Mr. Chairman, more than that, which are ministers like the Minister of Agriculture and things. But to a substantive point, is it your in-house engineers
Yes.
that do the scope
Yes.
on?
Yes.
Because just really back to the point that Member Warmington is making, because in some instances, you actually, and I can just speak of one that is now being done in my own constituency, where the roadway is being done, but then there are rocks there that not even a jackhammer can remove. So the cost is now eaten up in that $6 million. So when they're actually now going to have to lay down the surface, something has to be cut to make up back for the expenses. And I'm in agreement with Member Warmington is that in instances, instead of you completing one road, you may do it over a 2 cycle because of the limit that you actually put on the road. And I think what happens in some instances is to give a better surface. Some of these drainage works are left out because of the cost and it was not in the original scope. And when you read the Auditor General's report about the quality in some instances that within less than a certain period that you start seeing the potholes coming up, and it is a result of that. So I would say going forward is try and see if you can do, maybe not do 2 in a constituency over the period, but at least do 1 and put the amount on the road that it is done properly. If you see a road if the recommendation by the parish office that this road is done and 6 million can do it, yeah. But don't say you're going to go do one which is 2 times the length and only put 6 million. Yeah? Because you may do the front or the back of that road, but it's still a problem for the farmers to come out. And just to say to you, Barber Green is used on some of them. I've seen them, and I've seen it in my own constituency where the hill is steep enough, steep, and the water drainage, the Barber Green is done. You have to give credit where credit is due. But if the scope is being done by your engineers, I think a little more in depth in the costing and what is required, and not just say we have 6 million, just throw 6 million on it and where it pop, but a little more in depth on the deep down into the cost should be done.
Yeah, Mr. Thompson, or PS, what is your response to that? This idea that relatively insignificant or immaterial or insufficient is the right word, amounts are being allocated to fix roads and they're not being done properly, and it doesn't make sense because in no time flat the road is destroyed or compromised, rather than scoping the thing properly and doing the actual job that's required.
Okay. Morning, members and chairman. The board, when we started, realized that the allocation per road was somewhere around 5 million. So we were incrementally increased it to 8 million as a budget per road. But what we've been looking at now as we develop the road management database is that we're realizing that there's and it is going to have some effects out in the constituencies, because we're going to be doing less roads per constituency, because we're going to be targeting full lengths of road or significant lengths of road in order to realize a fair impact in respect of the roadworks and the impact on the farmers and the quality that is delivered. So this year, for example, in Portland, we combined 3.8 million into one project and targeted one single road in East Portland, right, to ensure that.
Can do that for Central St. Mary too?
We can do it for every constituency, and we will look at it with the cooperation, of course, of the stakeholders. We will do that, right? Because sometimes the exigencies and the demands of the stakeholders, push sometimes, and you try to respond to that. But what we are looking at, we're asking the engineers to ensure that the decisions that they make in respect of the features that are designed and proposed are driven by the specifications on the ground.
If you are chairman, Mr. Mayor, if you are guided by that master list,
Yes.
it gives you at least enough time to properly scope
Yes.
and design.
Yes.
So instead of changing from time to time
Yes.
what may be,
Yes.
which was
Remember
mentioned in the
when we came into the system, there was no master list, right? What we inherited was the program started in 2015, and RADA did not have at the time. So we began to develop a list of roads that we would be able to follow in respect of works that we do and road works that we intend to do over time. We needed a database that would inform our budget planning every year. What was in place was an arbitrary allocation in respect of an amount of kilometers of road to be done, not ascribed to particular roads. So that is now a changed process. We have the database, the roads are already being filled out, and the demographics are being filled into the matrix. And what will follow from that is an advancement in respect of the scoping of all of these roads so that we know exactly what needs to be done on particular roads prior to getting into a particular year. And we can do our road selections in advance.
I'm going to move to the next page of the prompt, which is a continuation of the same issue. There were also instances of incorrect application of variation orders for 7 contracts related to 9 roads. Repair costs totaled $50.7 million. RADA changed the location of works, a critical component of the contracts, using variation orders instead of formulating a new contract as required under the guidelines, since these new roads were not named in the original contract. We were not assured that value for money was obtained, as the variation orders, in quotes, did not provide justification or estimates of cost related to the changes to ascertain whether the additional works could have been undertaken at lower costs through competitive tender. Further, we noted that 4 of the roads substituted were on RADA's priority list to be rehabilitated, which raises further questions regarding the transparency of the selection process. Management's response. We accept the observation as a breach of proper GOJ procurement protocols. With immediate effect, RADA will review its current systems to ensure adherence to quality standards and guidelines related to its roadworks. All variations will be properly documented, justified, and prior approval sought from the Procurement Committee. There were cases in which roads designated on the priority list for repairs were done by another agency before RADA's intervention, and therefore other roads were selected. RADA acknowledges that at the time, the priority list was not updated to reflect these changes. With immediate effect, all changes for roads selected will be documented and the priority list updated accordingly. So we have a couple of issues here. We have, for 7 contracts related to 9 roads, $50.7 million of repairs. The location of the works was changed via variation orders instead of formulating a new contract. So you're fixing road A for a certain sum of money, and then you decide not to do that. You're going to do road B instead. And the same contract is used to do road B via variation order?
Yes.
That's what this is saying. But that would be a totally different scope of work, would it not? I mean, in what sense does the fixing of road B bear any relationship to the fixing of road A?
Yes, we admit that it should have been rescoped. And going forward, we said that we would correct that.
My understanding in interviewing the engineer is that they do rescope the road, but they failed to do the necessary documentation to put the evidence on file and follow some of the processes in re-engaging a new contract. But going forward, the protocol is that it must be rescoped and a new contract must be developed in respect of any change attendant to the road.
What is the time frame in practice for doing that process properly? What is the realistic time frame within which it can be done?
3 weeks.
3 weeks? Well, that's not an unreasonable period of time to spend to get it done properly. Yeah. Yes, Mr.
What they have said there, Chairman, they have acknowledged the errors that happen. They accept a finding of the Auditor General. What they have said in the response, that they accept, but going forward, they'll follow the proper procedure, because I fully accept the response, the explanation. They accept responsibility, and they say going forward, that won't happen again. So I don't think we need to labor it. They said it won't happen again. And the chairman just put in place a new protocol.
We're not laboring it. We're not laboring. I simply asked him how long it would take to do the proper procedure. Yeah. Yes.
Chairman,
yeah.
Let me just...
yes, Mr.
Campbell. Last week, Mr. Thompson or Mr. Mario, whomever, we had the CEO from NAA here, and he's involved in road construction and all that, as you know. And he gave us an average time for these contracts from procurement to execute to commencements of work of an average of 15 months. How are you able to do that within 3 weeks? Because my challenge is that we have I'm speaking to a personal situation now, which obtains in Northeast St. Catherine. There's a section of roadway which was scoped for $20 million or thereabouts. And it's been going now for 5 months, and we can't get anything going. So what process do you use, or you contemplate using, which would allow you to start something from new and get it done in 3 weeks?
Yeah, it's the rescoping and the submission of those variations to the procurement committee is what they're making reference to. Yes, because you're not going back to tender in that 3 weeks, which is what they were doing. But
so you do the rescoping and take it to the procurement committee, and but what were the remaining steps that would have to be followed before the other work, the rescoped works, could actually start? Is there anything? What further steps? A new contract would have to be signed. You'd have to retender the and how long would that take in practice?
It can take 5 years, depending on the way I know it will be done. Rescoping a contract, you give the contractor 5 years when you return it. It's not a multi-million-dollar contract. They need a lot of stuff. So these sizes, like in the agency that I work with, which were trouble. Then you see, it don't make a trouble. Right. When police overstep the bounds.
Listen, can we not be diverted to other matters?
Thank you. But please ask me not to badger me. Small contracts like these, you ask to return within 5 days. Not much, because what in these contracts, look at these tenders. If you gave it to me when I was a practitioner, I could do it within half an hour, complete all the forms and take it back to them. Because these are rates that are known by a contractor. You know what the rates are for everything. So within half an hour you can complete it. So 3 to 5 days is enough time.
All right. We'll move on to issue 6. Issue 6 says, RADA's inspection and monitoring activities were inconsistent with its quality assurance framework. As part of its quality management, RADA developed guidelines related to key quality requirements for general work activities such as bushing, drainage, earthworks, and pavement. An inspection checklist was also developed for use by works engineers to verify whether each phase of the roadwork complied with the requirements. RADA stated that its works engineers were usually on site throughout the road projects to carry out quality checks, and on completion of roadworks are required to inspect the road and related structures for deficiencies and defects. However, we found no notations on inspection checklists regarding the nature, frequency of testing and physical conditions of the roads during monitoring and inspection activities. Consequently, we could not determine how RADA assured itself of adherence to guidelines or if the quality of the construction complied with the design specifications. Our review of RADA's internal audit reports highlighted that site inspections conducted in February 2018 indicated that roads rehabilitated in late 2017 had begun to show signs of deterioration. For example, potholes, in a short period of 3 to 4 months after rehabilitation. This supported our concern that RADA did not take steps to assure itself that contractors rehabilitated roads to quality standards through performance tests or inspections by works engineers throughout the process. No response was provided to this. Can you provide a response now?
Chairman, we have responded to Parliament. Inadvertently, we have left out the portion for the Auditor General, and we are sorry about that. But one of the things that we try to do, Chairman, is to ensure that the proper procedures are followed. And in this particular instance, where engineers, the forms were developed, they went there, they do their checks, and unfortunately they did not document. So going forward, we have that as an enforcement for all subsequent roads to be properly documented, whatever is done, and the quality control checks done, certified, and of course placed on file. In terms of the signs, you mentioned that right, that roads show signs of deterioration. In short, these are isolated cases because, as you know, based on the climate that we are having, where we have periods of very intense rainfall, you know, we will have issues. But as soon as we identify, we use the retention of the contractors' money that we held to address.
Mr. Thompson, you can't use the word in terms of climate, because of climate, you know, you have damages here and there. You can't use that. And two, you mentioned that inadvertently, what have you, the documentations were left out. The documentation of notation of inspection and quality control, was that done, was that for just one project?
Yes.
One project?
No.
Right, it can be one project. So it's a systemic situation here where it's not done. You can't say, you know, was just left out. What you must say that you, as you said, going forward, you will ensure that this is done before any payment. You will see to that your staff get it done correctly. All right? And the other one, you can't talk about climate because of climate condition, the road mash up quick. We have been rain before I was born, before you were born. We have dry time before you were born, before I was born. Ever since creation, we have been those. If the thing is not done properly, it's going to deteriorate very shortly. And there are contractors out there, some of whom I do know. They don't use the mix as is specified. It's watered down. And if they don't use the specification, it has no effect. It doesn't hold. And before they finish, you can see bleeding in the surface of the stuff. There's no way in Southwest St. Catherine any of them can come and use a substandard mix to do chip and spray. And even after the finish, I go there and look for myself, because a professional, a person who understands the process and work, you will see the bleeding the moment you get there. You can see the truck spray go down the road, it comes back up, and you might have a 3 or 2 inches gap between both layers, and that can be discerned right away. Your job is to send them back or do it immediately. Send them back. You're going to see bleeding. So once you are bleeding at this time of the layer putting on the surface, the first shower of rain, that thing then break apart in your patrol. So you have to, your team needs to look for that before. Once you do that, you know, even though it's chip and spray, it lasts. It lasts. But they have to put the thing down in the right quantity, with the same thickness, and as specified. Because I'm saying some of these contractors, maybe that's why you say man leave from St. Thomas to Montego Bay. What they get, they mix from the petroleum or wherever, they water it down. And I know that they can use that where they continue to represent. So that's one thing you have to look at. And there are contractors, you know, definitely, who normally do something like that. They're known.
From a management perspective, how are you going to ensure that the practice changes within RADA and that the inspections are in fact done and are documented as having been done? How are you going to make sure of that?
Mr. Chairman and members, the discussions that we have had to improve the system has resulted in the establishment of a quality assurance framework, which sees a committee that has been established. And attendant to that, one of the results coming out of the deliberations of that committee in order to address the deficiencies that have been identified is they have reviewed all the checklists, the sort of records and documents that you use to monitor the activity. And we have used extensively the same kind of checklist that the NWA use, and in some cases have improved on them. And that will be used as a standard. And to ensure that to execute the kind of inspection and monitoring with the limited staff, we are going to be engaging, as was mentioned the last time, a collaborative framework through a MOU with the NWA. I have also made it very clear to RADA that where the need arises, we must spare no effort to ensure that we get external, qualified contractors to support the quality assurance framework, so that the checks and balances and the relevant labs must be engaged to execute the kind of tests that is needed to ensure that the quality of work that we are paying for is up to scratch. So there's been a review of how we execute the monitoring and the quality assurance, and we feel that what we have established going forward, based on what we have seen so far in the current year in terms of the execution of the set of roads subsequent to the audit report, we are seeing the kind of improvement that we anticipate in that system.
Chairman.
Member Guy.
Thank you. You hinted on something that I was going to ask you, PS. Going forward, you mentioned about sort of collaboration with National Works Agency. And prior to you mentioned that my question that I'd wanted to ask, but to elaborate on even further. The National Water Commission has some MOU with National Works Agency. I'm not suggesting that you do the same type of MOU. But in light of the fact that they are the primary road agency in this country, have you ever, but you hinted at it, but I'm asking nonetheless, have you ever thought of entering into some form of formal arrangement with them for their technical expertise, in light of the fact that you only have 5 engineers to do all the roads that you want to do across the island? And further, they may also be part of that external consultants that you want to do in the testing process at the end of the day. So in an effort to reinforce and beef up the services that you offer, because at the end of the day, you know, there was this contemplation, Chairman, in some administration, I can't remember, which is about the one road policy, where you would have one road authority, but not going there, but to get the expertise that exists so you don't have to, one, replicate it in your agency at additional costs by employing people directly, but also to lean on that services, although you'd pay for it, but to lean on that agency to get that expertise so that you can have proper roads at the end of the day.
We are in agreement with that, and that's the direction in which we're looking. The unit needs strengthening in terms of the complement and in terms of the competence. So we are engaged in a process which should see some improvement in both of those areas. And similarly, procedurally, the Auditor General identified that, you know, you would find the engineers engaging in other activities that lean to, you know, things that are not consistent with their function and things like the procurement process and all of these kinds of things. You know, we have reviewed the steps that will create the level of transparency and engagement appropriately, separation of function, to be able to have the kind of quality assurance framework. And as mentioned, we will continue to work with external agencies to reinforce the improvement.
Yes, you seem to be quite integrated into what's happening at RADA. You seem to be fairly hands-on. Is that typical in your ministry of how the agencies and departments and entities within the portfolio relate to the PS? In some situations we've seen where PSs kind of leave it to boards and hope to get reports, but you seem to be quite knowledgeable about what efforts are being made within RADA to improve processes and so on.
Well, you know, Mr. Chairman, I try my best as a new permanent secretary to engage, you know, through a framework of collaboration. So, I mean, these documents and the Auditor General, it's addressed to the permanent secretary, and therefore it behoves me to be able to respond and to familiarize myself to the extent where, based on my experience and my competence, to be able to engage in the improvement that is required.
Indeed.
You know, in a overall, it is really, you know, taxpayers' money, and the money comes from the Ministry of Finance through the ministry. So I have to sign the money that comes from Ministry of Finance over to RADA to execute the works. And I too, from where I sit in my observation, would have some of these concerns that have been expressed by the Auditor General. So some corrective measures were being implemented even prior to the audit. You would have heard of the development of the master database. Some of these things started prior to the audit. So it's always in a bid to work with RADA and the chairmanship to improve and continue to manage. There's something that I want to mention, the matter of the allocation for roads, 5, 6, 8 million. I've said to RADA that there's no real restriction, you know. It's like, is RADA that comes up with the notion of allocating 5 or 6 million to a road. And so it is still RADA and the board that would be responsible for reviewing that to get the kind of improvement being recommended by members. So even though those figures are stated, there's no real restriction. It's really an evaluation of the demand and an evaluation of the road condition that should really dictate. So that is something that we definitely will take on board in reviewing our approach, what we do.
Perhaps there are pressures and being exerted on them from here and there and far and near. I can imagine. Member Dunn, I think, and then Member Witter. Go ahead, Member Witter. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard Pierce mention about engaging the National Works Agency, which I think is quite good. But have you contemplated seeking support from the local authorities, let's say municipal corporations, as
Parish council.
Parish council, yes.
Municipal corporation.
Yes, because they would have been equipped with the, with the local knowledge and so on. Each corporation has at least 3 or 4 engineers. You have a soup, assistant soup, deputy soup, and works overseer. All of them are engineers, so you could seek some support from them in terms of.
Yes, thanks for that observation. We are in the process now of engaging the municipal corporation through an MOU for them to assist at the local level with any work being executed as it relates to road work. And I think that will strengthen our capacity to deliver on time and within the budget. And in discussion with the PS, we will look at the roads in general and determine that 6 or 7 million really is not adequate to address the myriads of issues out there as it relates to roads. So we will be reviewing that. And this is where the municipal corporation will assist greatly.
Chairman, the idea of the municipal corporations assisting and collaborating with RADA is critical, because what it does, it opens up additional capacity which RADA does not have to be able to scope a significant amount of roadworks right across the country, because they have 13 municipalities with 3 or so engineers in each of those areas. So they will be able to assist us in the rapid turnover in respect of the scoping. They have the competencies internally as well. And as such, with that kind of collaboration, we'll see the road program advancing, because one of the bottlenecks in the system is actually the scoping of the roads, given our 5 engineers. So this will allow us to be able to advance the program and to ensure the quality components of it are at a higher standard.
So you're going to have an MOU with who? With each
municipal corporation,
separately,
because each one is a statutory entity on its own.
All right. Member Dunn, you had a point?
Yes, Chairman, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. 2 questions I'd like to ask. One, is there any road research unit in the Ministry of Agriculture? And 2, right,
Sorry, am I to answer?
Right.
No, there's no.
I'm coming.
Oh, okay.
Continuing. And 2, there are 2 forms of road surface material that you are using now, the double surface and the asphalt. And of course, the double surface, as you mentioned before, is what is used predominantly on farm roads. So the other question is, are there other materials that would be considered appropriate to be used on farm roads, and are you looking at any of those materials?
Before we go any further, may I just enlighten my colleague here? If you're talking about asphaltic concrete, that is $16,500 per ton. Therefore, the $6 million.
can't buy any asphalt concrete to do even a few meter work. So forget the argument about asphalted concrete. And I said before, donkey doesn't need asphalted concrete to walk and go to the farm.
Thank you for the intervention, but I still would like to hear from you whether there are any other materials that are being considered and the research issue.
Technically, you're now doing a collection of roads to identify farmers for the database.
Mr. Chairman, the only activity which we execute is the matter of the evaluation and collection of information to establish a database. But in terms of road research, no, there's no unit in the ministry doing that.
Fair enough.
I mean, we're aware generally that there's always technology that you can identify that, people are even using some kind of rubberized technology for surfacing, but I mean, those are very costly at this time, and but I mean, we are open if there is a recommendation that is economically feasible and will assist the process. We are willing to look at it. Perhaps through the collaboration with our partners, as mentioned, some of these ideas may flow.
Yes, Chair.
And Chairman, with the use of asphaltic concrete is actually a targeted approach depending on gradients and the effect of erosivity, right, hillsides, etc. We also use concrete in some instances where it's appropriate, where washout can take place.
All right, we'll move on to the next page of the prompt, which this is actually an issue which has been resolved, so I don't think we need to spend much time on it. It was to do with your data on FRRP performance. I have to remind myself what the acronym stands for. Maybe somebody can tell me. Oh, yes, that's the acronym for the Farm Road Program, Road Rehabilitation Program. Based on the data provided by RADA, the NTA would have substantially exceeded its target for 3 years, 2016-16 to 17-18, under the Farmer Rehabilitation Program. However, the achievement was reviewed in a context where RADA frequently scoped down the roadwork projects at the same cost level by excluding critical drains and culverts, key components of road infrastructure that could ensure its longevity. According to the data, RADA would have spent approximately $120 million less than budgeted to complete 103 kilometers more road than targeted. Concurrently, the average cost per kilometer to rehabilitate the roads was almost half the cost that was budgeted, 47%. These results challenge the veracity of RADA's budgeting process and/or the accuracy of the database. Management's response was, RADA has reinforced protocols and procedures to ensure that once scope of work has been established and the contract issued, no rescoping or downscoping will be done without justification and the necessary approval. It's important to note that RADA does not always rehabilitate the entire length of a road, but repairs the worst affected segments. The lower than estimated cost per kilometer of the road was based on the following factors. During the period 2015-16 through 17-18, RADA records captured entire length of the road, not just the portion repaired. Since 2018-19, RADA started recording the actual length of the road repaired. Therefore, when calculations are done using total cost of actual length of road, it would impact the overall cost per kilometer. It should also be noted that based on the type of material used, costs would also vary. Anyway, this has been marked as resolved. Move to the next page, dealing with paragraphs 2.21 to 2.22 of the report. Responsibility for quality management of farm road rehabilitation was shared by individuals in 7 different positions within RADA's engineering unit. However, quality assurance is mainly controlled by the 4 works engineers who played multiple roles in the quality assurance process, and as such, bore responsibility for the quality of the roadworks island-wide. Before a contractor is hired, the works engineers are involved in the selection of roads to be rehabilitated, preparation of specifications used for developing the bills of quantities, and preparing invitations for bids, the tendering process, and recommendations to the contracts committee for awards. These multiple roles limit effective check and balances to identify possible misappropriations. Management's response is that the observation by the Auditor General is not correct. Please see RADA's existing procedure re quality assurance, segregation of work. Process flows clearly show the roles and responsibilities of different actors at the parish and national levels. Selection of roads is initiated by extension officers and not by engineers. The procurement unit is responsible for preparation of bids and tendering processes. RADA is in the process of strengthening the procurement unit by adding additional staff. And the response to that from the Auditor General's department is our concern related to the multiple roles ascribed to works engineers, which could limit checks and balances that could identify possible misappropriations. We were not speaking to the initiation of the selection of roads. For example, in relation to works, in Table 1, work engineers number 1 and 2 were involved in assessing the roads, bid tender evaluation, recommendation of contractors, developing the engineer's estimate, monitoring and checking roadworks, and certification of payments. And they set out the table here, engineer 1, engineer 2, and so on, and the amounts. So, focusing specifically on the multiple roles that the engineers play, how do we ensure that they are not, in effect, monitoring themselves on their own work, and therefore
Chairman,
you have a flawed system of checks and balances?
Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Oman.
I wouldn't question this process. In any agency department, the engineering section, it deals with all the functions here, prepare tender, scope and what have you, and certify the work, because they are the person who put the scope together. The only section, as I said, it's a procurement unit that intend to prepare, rather than the process of strengthening the procurement unit by adding additional staff. The only section that I will have a problem with here, or would not fully with is you always have, as required by the procurement guidelines, that you have a procurement department which is separate, that does the evaluation and recommendation. So that is the only area within the entire thing here that would require separation. But all the others fall within the ambit and responsibility of the department that you have engineers. So the only section is the area to deal with procurement.
Well, thank you so much.
In every unit, in every agency, this is wait about the procurement.
I'm just wondering why this has been highlighted by the Auditor General's department.
Good question.
Yeah.
Good question. I want myself too.
If
they were writing the procurement guidelines.
Perhaps you can comment on this. Mr. Warming is saying that the issue of checks and balances within the engineering department really does not arise. These are all functions that would normally be done within an engineering department. The only function which really ought to be separated would be those relating to procurement, which would include the evaluation and recommendation of contractors and so on.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah. To a certain extent, we are all correct, except the fact that we started out by saying that the Auditor General observation is not correct. It is not true. It is indeed correct, because the fact is that the engineers were involved in all these steps. And when we discussed it, we identified that for good and proper procedure, they should not be a part of the bid tender evaluation and recommendation of contractors, because they are the ones that would have done the scoping. So the CEO, following all of this, had actually written a letter to indicate that there must be a change in the composition of the procurement committee, which allows for the engineers to be called if necessary, but not for them to be sitting as a member of the committee to deal with the tender evaluation and recommendation of contractor.
Thank you, PS. Ms. Ludwig, do you have anything to add, or is that?
We accept that because that was our concern.
I see. All right, we can move on. Final page of the prompt relates to paragraph 2.23 of the report. Our review of RADA's employment records show that officers responsible for the roadworks met the required qualification and possess the necessary experience. In addition, RADA identified and arranged training for 4 of its works engineers to enhance their competence in carrying out the stated quality assurance procedures. These officers, along with other officers of the Engineering Services Unit, participated in a 2-day training session in July 2019 entitled Assessing Quality and Monitoring of Farm Roads at a cost of $49,600. The general feedback from the participants was that the training would assist when carrying out their assigned tasks, but that additional training would be required. To date, we found no evidence that the additional training has been provided. Management's response is that these observations are accepted. There currently exists a memorandum of understanding with the Built Environment faculty of UTEC to facilitate the formal training of staff, RADA staff, and other interested parties to build capacity and broaden the available pool of skills. Additionally, customized training sessions are to be organized with the support from NWA, which is first quarter 2020. One training session was conducted with the NWA since the audit was concluded. Areas covered were construction of gabion baskets, construction base laying for roads, retaining walls, quality checks, among others. All right. Any questions on that? That was essentially an update as to what they're trying to do to strengthen the training aspect of that. So I think any issues? No more issues? Well, I can just thank the PS, Mr. Spence, thank Mr. Thompson, thank you, Mr. Myrie, and your colleagues behind you for attending on both occasions and for your cooperation and responses, which were informative and helpful. And we look forward to seeing improvements as you've committed yourselves to.
Thank you on behalf of the team, Mr. Chairman, and members, and support from the Auditor General. Thank you all very much.
Members, we were to have moved on today to another matter, which was the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development as dealt with in the annual report of the Auditor General's Department for 2016-17 and 2017-18. However, it transpired that that ministry seems to be in Panama, or much of it seems to be in Panama for some conference, and the PS had indicated to the clerk of the committee that she would be in Panama and couldn't attend today. We had asked whether she could send a representative, and the response was that no, because the issues are such that she would want to or need to be here herself. The minister called me yesterday and confirmed that this is the situation, and I think he called me from Panama. So we are not able to proceed with that matter today. So, Madam Clerk, what is on the date of next, well, any other business? The date of the next meeting? Well, next week is the opening of Parliament. Yeah, we can't meet next week. Not on Tuesday anyway.
Right.
Is there any other day next week we could meet?
But after purgation, then you have the budget.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to meet during that, because I don't know which the standing finance are going to meet at it.
Yes, but for example,
Which days are standing finance?
is there any available slot? For example, Wednesday morning next week, or is that available? That's the 12th. I'm not sure when standing finance is going to meet, but I don't think it's right after because it waits for yeah, because the Auditor General has to review the estimates. Yeah.
What about the 18th?
Standing finance. What time have they scheduled it for? At what time?
Normally all day.
10.
What about the 18th?
That's available, I think. That's available. So, what are you saying about the 12th?
Have to call the PAC clerk and find out if the 12th is available.
I see. She's just going to check if the 12th is available with the PAAC. Members, the normal dates that we would be sitting based on our fortnightly arrangements would be the 11th, which is next week when the House is opening. So we can't sit on the 11th. And then the 25th is Standing Finance Committee. So we're into March. So I think we'll just have to, the 3rd of March. Yeah.
And there are more bills coming in, there are more legislation. They have to set up more time to let committees. So
Well, they have to.
just
So, members, the proposed date for the next meeting is the 3rd of March, Tuesday the 3rd of March. We will deal with the local government matter. All right. Would you move for the adjournment?
So move.
Thank you, member. Seconded by? Would somebody second the motion for adjournment?
No one is immune to mental illness. Your age